So this is a video
Recently, we were
from Fextralife. Now, if you've ever looked up a guide for a Dark Souls game, for Bloodborne, for Elden Ring, Fextralife is the first one that pops up, right? They're the predominant one. They're the gameplay first people. I caught wind of this video. I've not seen it yet. There's a part of it that I've seen that I wanted to discuss.
We were given the opportunity to travel to Los Angeles to play Armored Core 6 in person, hands-on with From Software and Bandai Namco. And not only that, we were given the opportunity to pilot a real-life mech, which was pretty cool. And in this video, I want to go over our impressions from that event and tell you what we think about Armored Core 6 so far and what you can expect when the game comes out next month on August 25th.
I did not know it was that fucking soon. Wow.
Neither did I.
That's very exciting.
It makes me tingle.
Do you have any first impressions of that brief snippet we saw of gameplay, of the game itself?
Not particularly. I mean, it looks like a lot of mech games I've seen. In fact, it doesn't look that crazy to me, but I'm also not gonna shit on it from like 2 seconds of footage, you know.
Right. Now, for anyone at home watching, the way we do this is I stream the content directly to Discord, so that way there's minimal delay, which may impact, you know, visual fidelity and stuff like that. I just want to make that clear.
And lastly, I want to talk a bit about the graphics of the game. This is kind of a sore point for me. The graphics of this game are serviceable, no doubt. But the game is made for last gen and this gen consoles, and so I think you're going to see it once again, the graphics of this game suffer, kind of the way Elden Ring's graphics suffered. Obviously, no one cares about the graphics of Elden Ring, right? Like, the game is good, it's phenomenal. Graphics are not the most important thing for Elden Ring.
I've never heard anyone complain about Elden Ring's graphics. In fact, a lot of people were like, oh, these are really good graphics.
The people faces in Elden Ring look a little weird, but I think in terms of, like, environments and the like, Elden Ring is one of the best games they've put out. Elden Ring won Best Art Direction at the Game Awards, and I had seen people kind of being like, "Oh, this should have won, this should have won." But it's how do you say that if you've played through like K-Lig? How do you say that if you've gone through like the big capital city in Elden Ring? That's stunning. Like, there's so many areas in that game that are so visually distinct and so striking and so memorable, and it's hard to look at it and be like, oh yeah, well, it's serviceable, I guess. This is, I feel like, a much more egregious argument for this game. I'm gonna let this play for a few more moments. Kind of really soak in the visuals.
But I kind of feel like in a mech game, graphics are a little more important. Like, you want the combat to be as flashy as possible, as visually as appealing as possible. And I feel like you're starting to notice how dated From Software's engine is getting in Armored Core 6. I mean, gameplay-wise, the game ran smooth. I was up above 60 FPS the whole time. There were no bugs, there were no glitches, there were no crashes. Everything ran great. And we've come to expect this from Software. They typically don't have these issues in their games at launch, so that's really good news. But I do wonder, at what point are they going to make the leap to a new engine like Unreal 5? I mean, they are falling further and further behind the industry by using this antiquated engine, and I wonder at what point are people going to quit forgiving it? You know what I mean? Like, they do so many good things in their games, and graphics are not everything. But I feel like graphics are a huge part of a mech game compared to something like Elden Ring, and they got to make that jump at some point, and I wonder when we're going to see it. Obviously, Elden Ring DLC is going to still be on the Elden Ring engine, but what about the games after that? Are they going to move away from the engine that they've been using, or are they going to continue to use this because it's what they know and what works for them? I think time will tell on that, but I really, really hope at some point they're able to make the jump to a more modern engine.
This is the part that I wanted to talk about. It's so bizarre.
It's such a weird argument, especially, like, the most you need when we think of mechs, they're all blocky. Like, this is blocky as shit. You could have made something that looked like this 5 years ago without too much trouble, right? So that doesn't really add up. And then it's like, oh, well, the only thing I think you need is good video effects. which this seems to have. It needs
No.
like good, special effects, the good explosions, the good smoke, and everything else. That's there.
Like, as I'm
What
watching
else
this,
do you fucking need?
this looks stunning. This looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see how someone can look at this and be like, oh, these are serviceable graphics. No, this game looks fantastic. I'm legitimately trying to think, like, well, what's a game that I think blows this out of the water?
You know what? So if you look at this, right, and for everyone at home, I kind of mentioned earlier that you played Final Fantasy 16, which you've come to really hate. That is a very beautiful game, graphically. But like, even do you look at that and go, oh wow, this is like, it blows this out of the water graphically?
No. In fact, I think in many ways, this feels a lot like it's in parody with what action scenes in Final Fantasy 16 are. Like, maybe not the really big effects heavy ones, but like, Final Fantasy 16 I don't think is really ever doing anything particularly interesting with its effects work. It's, the lasers are light up, and that's what they are. That's what they do. That's, I'm thinking about the games that I've been the most impressed with visually this year. Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space were both really gorgeous. They're really stunning games. But, like, it's incremental. And if you put a gun to my head and said things like, if you put a gun to my head and you said something like, okay, well, what's better? I would be looking at these games and I would be saying, like, well, the weather effects in Resident Evil are very interesting, and Armored Core doesn't have anything like that. I'd be saying stuff like, well, the fog and the ray tracing really adds something to Dead Space, and I think that gives it the win. I would be going down into, like, the smaller incremental stuff. I would not be, like, flat out like, oh, well, this is nowhere near the fidelity. And also, look how fucking fast it is. It doesn't need that level of visual fidelity. You're barreling past shit.
And what's, like, when you're saying about weather, like, who is sat in a mech game, right? And going, oh, look, the snow is really good. Oh, look, the rain looks really good. Like, this is fine for what it is. Those, like, the effects of that, like, the clouds billowing off, the sandstorm, it's enough. You don't need, like...
This looks fantastic. I look at this and I'm like, oh, I'm in a sand... Look, I can tell there are weather. Like, it's raining. It's, like, in a weird, fucked up bay. This looks fantastic. This is enough for the atmosphere. If you want it to be really overbearing, you could probably go very overbearing with it, but I don't think they did. I wouldn't complain about this unless I was in a conversation where someone was, like, being critical of it and I was thinking about it for the first time. My first thought when I saw the video, when I saw the clip of the dude talking about it, was, holy shit, that game looks really good. I didn't expect it to look this good. And then it jumps into him, talking shit about it. It was absurd.
And you said this guy is, like, some kind of fanboy for this shit?
Well, he's one of the Fextralife guys. So, like, he covers FromSoft video games in autistic detail to, like, a deep degree. So he may not be super familiar with Armored Core, but he's like, his complaints are stuff like, like, when are they going to shift over to Unreal Engine 4 or stuff like that. And it's such it's such a bizarre sentiment. And I think there's a major flaw with the Unreal Engine. Which is just the simple fact that people don't really do anything interesting in it. You can do interesting things in it. You can make a really visually unique thing, but I don't think they do. I think a lot of Unreal Engine games look pretty samey. They all kind of have that same repurposed slop look to them. Even the ones that do try for a more unique art style feel a little awkward and rough. Like, No More Heroes 3 is a big one. That game has bigger issues, and probably, you know, that stem from that. But that's what kind of catches me about that stuff. That, whereas this looks fantastic, it looks unique, and I look at it and I'm like, is there a deeper technical reason that Unreal games don't tend to look like this? I don't know. And if I had the choice, if I was the guys at FromSoft and I had a blank check basically to do the games I wanted to make, maybe I would want to stick with my own engine that gives me that level of proprietary. Obviously, not everyone can do that, right? Like, the guys who make No More Heroes can't do that. They're a very small company. They can't build an engine for every game. They don't have the funds for it. That just makes sense. A lot of indie devs are like that. But it's just something I've noticed. That games in Unreal games in Unreal tend to look pretty samey. And I think to look at how textured and atmospheric From Software's titles over the last 10 years have been, and then go, when are they going to upgrade that engine, is absurd to me.
Yeah, I feel what you mean.
It's like, imagine Starfield was running at 120 FPS on console, and then going like, when's Bethesda going to upgrade that engine? Wouldn't need to. But if Starfield ran at like 300 FPS on like modern console systems, I'd be sitting there and going like, God damn, dude, they perfected game engines 20 years ago, didn't they? Which I feel like is what I'm going to be saying about Capcom's engine for almost forever, where it's like, why fucking bother? Like, why would you bother to upgrade your engine when it's still running perfectly? When it's still, not only does it look as good as the leading engines, but it's kind of outperforming them in a lot of meaningful ways.
Yeah. I know, I think people just, this feels like they literally turn around and were like, oh yeah, you've got to come up with some complaint, and he just picked the most basic bitch argument to complain about.
It's so, forced. Like, it feels so... It borders on disingenuous.